What is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. If you are new here, my name is Kelvin Soa and I'm on a mission to help new developers understand how to build cross-platform mobile applications with React Native. In today's episode, we are diving into a very common but critical concept in mobile app development, which is the rendering of lists. Whether you are building a contact app or a chat app or even a booking system, at some point you are going to need to display a list. And in React Native, we have two main ways of doing this. We can first of all use a ScrollView or a more optimized option, which is the FlatList. At first glance, they might seem pretty similar. After all, they both allow you to scroll through a bunch of contents. But under the hood, they both behave very differently. In this video, we are going to break down each one of them, and we are going to talk about the pros and cons of using the ScrollView and then the FlatList. And this is going to help you decide when and how to use them. For example, the ScrollView is super simple to implement and it is perfect for small list of items like rendering FAQ lists or just some filter options. But when it comes to situations where we want to render dozens or even hundreds of data, the FlatList is the best option or the best approach to go with. Unlike the ScrollView, which loads and renders all the data at once, the FlatList renders only what's visible on the screen and loads the remaining data as you scroll through the list. It's also packed with built-in optimizations like lazy loading, pull to refresh, separators, and many more. In this video, we'll walk through both approaches step by step, and I'll show you how to loop through an array of data and render components dynamically while styling them and applying interactivity along the line. If this sounds exciting, do want to like and share this video, and also hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. Now let's jump right into it. In our workspace here. Now before we start, let me switch to the main branch, and then let me make sure that our local changes matches with what's on the remote branch, and that's just what we've done here. Now let's check out to today's lesson. Create a new branch here, say git checkout-b, and then this is lesson 5. Okay, good. So now we are in the lesson 5, so we can go ahead and then begin. So let's create a new file inside the component folder, call it lesson 5.css, and then let's use our favorite snippet. Let's change the name to lesson 5. And over here, we can go back to the index and then import it. So let's comment out this lesson. And then let's go ahead and then import this new one. Make sure you are importing the lesson 5 from component/lesson 5. And then we close it over here like this. So it's a self-closing component. So as you can see, we have it here. Now let's go into the lesson 5 and let's begin. Now with the lists, right, we have the normal list where we have the data or the items being rendered inside a ScrollView, and then we have the FlatList. Now we're going to first touch on the normal list where the data is being rendered in the ScrollView. Then we also do the same thing with FlatList, and then we are going to see the difference. So here I'm going to paste in some array over here in a moment, an array of animals, right? So let's say we have a zoo and then we are keeping records of the animals inside our zoo. We have these animals in the array here like this, and each animal has a name. The name of the animal is there, and then it has an ID too, as you can see here. So this is the data that we want to render on our screen. Now the simplest way or the simplest approach to go by this is to basically render these items in a loop, right? That's the normal list. So in that case, let's clear this, and then we are going to say, bring the curly braces here, and I'm going to say animals.map, and then we open the bracket here, and we open another one, which in this bracket, this .map is going to contain a function, an arrow function here. So I'm going to say animal, right? It could be anything. You can call it item, anything at all you want to name it, animal. And then the next parameter is index, right? Which is the index of the item inside the array. So the animal here is the next item inside the array. So for each animal inside the array, you get that particular animal here and then its index. And let's create the array, the function over here. and then we make it return a JXS component like this. So let's put a view over here like this. Okay, good. So now this is the structure of rendering items. Okay, right now we're not seeing anything because we are just rendering a view here. Now let's go ahead and then add something. So inside the view, let's add a text here. And then inside the text is going to contain animal.name like this. So let's reload the server here. Good. So now you can see that the items are being rendered over here. The names of the animals are being rendered over here. Now you can see we are getting this error warning here saying each child in a list should have a unique key. Okay, each child in a list should have a unique key. That's because since we are rendering the items here in the map, we need to provide a key, and we can simply use any unique identifier, right? So we can say the key can be animal.id. Why are we using the ID? We're using the ID because the ID is unique to all the items, so we can go ahead and then use it. Or we can choose to use the index, right? Because we know that the index it starts from 0 to the end of the items in the list. So the index is always unique. We can also go ahead and then use the index instead of using the ID. We can just replace it with the index like this. But let's go ahead and then use the animal.id. Now let's style this wrapper here a little bit so that it's more visible. So we are going to say styles.wrapper. Okay, and then in here, we are going to say wrapper. Then we pass in some styles. Let's say padding here is going to be 10. And then background color, let's make it violet. And then let's say border radius of let's say 12. And then let's add a margin vertical of 14. And then a margin horizontal of, let's say, 20. Okay, so right now this is what we have. And let's add a container style over here for the main one. Let's say styles.container like this. And then let's apply the styles here. So I just want to make it more visually appealing so that we can see what's going on. So let's say flex 1. Let's make sure the width covers the whole screen, so 100% like this. Okay, so the padding, let's actually make the padding 14 instead. All right, this looks okay. Good. So as you can see here now, we are rendering this animals list inside this this loop. Okay, it's inside this loop, and it's obvious that it is overflowing. You can see that the items here are overflowing, which means, and we are unable to scroll. Okay, we are unable to scroll, which means we have more items which does not fit the screen. So in situations like this, it's good to, or it's best to use the scroll view. Okay, it's best to use the scroll view. So to use the scroll view, simply just say scroll view like this. Say scroll view. And then you import it from React Native like this. So over at React Native, import React from React. Just make sure you are importing it from React Native, not React. So my bad. So import this from React Native like this. Good. Let's close this one. So we are now importing the scroll view here. So since we now have the scroll view, we can carry everything here and then paste them inside the scroll view like this. So now we should be able to scroll. So you see how like cool this actually looks. We can now scroll the item. But the problem with this approach is that if, let's say, you are fetching some data from your API or your backend, and the data is massive, with this approach, it's actually going to render everything all at once, which it consumes a lot of resource in doing things like this. To be more efficient, the best approach to go with is a flat list, right? A flat list in cases where you have a lot of data that you are going to render over here. Now, assuming this animals array, we're actually getting it from an API or a backend, and it's like 1,000 records. it's not a good approach to have them display over here like this. We should actually use a flat list. And with a flat list, how it's going to work is that it's only going to render when the item gets into the view. Okay, it's only going to render when the item gets into the view. So as you are scrolling, the next item now starts rendering. To start rendering, instead of all the items rendering at once, and then we scroll. Now, so here the flat list is more efficient when it comes to rendering data that is actually coming in huge numbers. So let's look at how we can actually make use of the flat list. So what I'm going to do now is comment out the scroll view, and then let's start looking at the flat list. So with the flat list, similar to the scroll view, you import it from React Native like this, copy it, and then you import from React Native like this. And then it's expecting some two compulsory data. The first one is some two compulsory props. The first one is data, right? Now the data simply is the array that you want to be rendered. So in our case, it's the animals array. And then the next prop is the render item. Now this render item is the component that we want to be rendered. So in our case, it's this JSX component. So you can basically put in an arrow function that returns a JSX component like this. So I can go ahead and then copy this component here and paste it here like this. Okay. Now, once you paste it over there, this function here, it has a parameter here called item, right? This item basically is each item from the animals list. So over here, you can notice that what we did was we mapped through the animals, and then we got each item inside the animals. Now, these animals could have been called item like this, but we chose to name it animal. So we can actually use the item here instead of the animal and say item.id and then item.name. So this should now be rendered on the screen. So let's refresh our development server. And as you can see, we have the same thing. You see how easy it actually is. And this looks way cleaner than what we have here. Now, we can actually do a lot of other things with the flat list. Now, you see, first of all, you notice that over here, we used a key. We just place the key inside the component, and then we use the ID. Now, with the flat list, we need to actually make use of the key extractor to get a key item to be used as the key for this rendering. So it actually takes in an arrow function here, and then we return the item. So we pass in the item over here, and then we return what parameter we want to use, or which ID we want to use as the key. Okay, so it is actually expecting a string, not a number. That's why I get in this TypeScript error, because in the data here you can see that the ID is of type number, right? But then it is expecting a string, so we can just say .id to string here, just to cast it to string to fix this error. So that's for the key. Now we can also create an item separator. So assuming we want to create a separator for all the items, let's say underneath each item, we want to add a separator to it. We can actually pass in a prop called item separator component like this. Item separator component like this. And it also returns an arrow function. It takes an arrow function that returns a JSX component. So just like this, we can simply have a view. Now let me just use this self-closing view tag over here, and then pass a style to it. I'm going to say styles.line divider like this. And then I can go ahead and then write some styles over there. So I'm simply going to say height should be 1. Width should be 100%. And then the background color should be gray like this. So as you can see, it creates this divider on under all the items except the top and then the last item. So you can see for the last item, we don't have any divider there. So it creates the divider between all the items, excluding the top item and then the item at the bottom. So this is how like efficient we can do things like this. Now we can also add a list empty component. So the component that is going to be rendered when the list items here is empty. So assuming we had empty array over here, what is going to be rendered? That's what that prop does. So the list, that's the list empty component over here. It also takes an arrow function that returns a JSX. So for that, we can simply return a text. We can simply return a text here like this, saying there is no data at the moment, like this. Okay, so right now our array is not empty, so we are seeing the items. So if I remove the animals and then put an empty array here, we should see that there is no data at the moment. That's what is being rendered over here. Good. So basically, that's how you can ignore this TypeScript error for now. So basically, this is how the list empty components works. Now we are getting this TypeScript error because the data that is being passed here, it hasn't been typed, right? Because the animals here expect ID and then name, but then this array has no type. It's of type any. That's why you're getting this error. So there's just some TypeScript errors that is complaining. But then you get the point I'm trying to make here. When the items in the data is an empty array, when you set the list empty component, that component is going to be rendered instead of whichever data is being over here, because the items here is empty. So it's going to render the list empty components like so. So let's bring back the animals like this, and it's going to get rendered. Now we also have the list footer component, just like the name says, list footer. It's a component that shows at the footer of your list. Okay, so list footer component. It also takes an arrow function that returns a JXS component. So we can also basically return a text over here and then see this is the footer like this. And then when you scroll down, you should see it over there saying this is the footer, just like what you want. And just like having a list footer, we should also have list header component over here like this. It also takes an arrow function that returns a JXX like this. So over here too, you can just see this is the header like so. Awesome. So when you scroll, you can see this is the header item here. Now you can, this is just for explanation's sake, but you can customize it and then make it look exactly how you want your UI to be and what's not. Yeah, so basically this is some of the flexibilities we get from using FlatList. Now finally, let's talk about the onRefresh function handler over here with FlatList. That actually helps us to pull down items, to scroll, and it probably reloads the data over here. So the whole idea with that is just like apps like Twitter and then Instagram, when you on your feed, you can probably scroll, and then when you pull down, you see a spinner at the top, and then it reloads the data with new data for you. So we can actually mock something like that with the onRefresh prop here. So onRefresh here, it takes a function. So for now, let's put a simple arrow function here that logs a string. So we're simply going to log refreshing like this. Now when you add the refreshing, the onRefresh, it is required to add another prop called refreshing, right, which is a boolean to show whether or not it is actually refreshing. Okay, so it takes a boolean here. You can see refreshing here is true. So you can see that right now the scrolling is happening over there like this. Let's refresh this page. All right, good. So right now this onRefresh function here is not being hit, but then the refreshing, since it is on true, we are seeing the loader at the top. Okay, so let's set this to false for now. Now let's create a useState hook over here to perform a mock loading state, right? So we are going to call it refreshing, set refreshing. Make sure we import it, and then we set it to false from the start. So we can place this refreshing over here like this. Now, let's create a function that handles the refreshing like this. And then we say that, first of all, once we run the function, we're going to set refreshing to true, which means the refreshing has started, right? And let's set a timeout. Let's set a timeout here. And inside this timeout, it's going to take 3 seconds. Okay, inside this time now. So when we set the refreshing to true, after 3 seconds, we are going to set the refreshing to false, which means that the data is going to be loaded in 3 seconds, basically. So once that is done, we copy this function and then we place it here instead, like this. Okay, place it over here like this. Now let's reload, R to reload. Good, so now this is what we have. Now if we scroll, you should see that it is loading, takes 3 seconds, and then boom, it's done loading. To confirm this, let's log something over here. Let's say console.log refresh complete. Let's put it inside the timeout and then place it over here like this. All right, let's reload the server and then let's pull up again. Good, you can see refresh complete. Let's try it again. It loads for 3 seconds and then you should see refresh complete here. So basically, you see how simple it is to actually make use of the refresh, the on refresh function and then the refreshing prop with the flat list. This is how flexible we can actually make use of the flat list and how it allows us to create all these components, add all these components to our list. This is very useful for building production level apps, and that's how it helps you to write efficient lists. So in scenarios like this, assuming we have the data, a massive data which we are fetching from the API, it's actually going to load them on the UI very efficiently. That's why it's actually a better way of rendering the data on the screen as opposed to using a normal list and then a screen. Now, that does not mean that this approach is bad. No, we can actually make use of this approach if we know for a fact that the data that we are rendering is not that much or it's not a lot, and we don't need more of these props over here. Okay, because assuming you want to do something, add the header, the footer, the list empty space, and all these things with this approach, with the ScrollView approach, it's going to be a lot of code that you're going to write. But then with the flat list, it makes everything very simple for us to add all these features. Okay, so if this video has been helpful, please leave a like and then hit the subscribe button if you haven't, and also share this video as well. It is very helpful and it's going to help this channel grow. Thank you very much, and then see you in the next video.